got an afternoon waiting for an engine for that and parts for that. So this is in here. So refresher, last time we filmed this car, it was on the dyno, we did some pulls, and we are pushing the head gasket. So the engine needs to be O-ringed if we want to do what we want to do. So this engine's coming out, we're going to O-ring it, but we're going to use this car for some testing related to that automatic transmission, that stock A8, and a couple of eBay turbos. So this all has to come out so that we can put the other engine and transmission in. This engine needs to go on a stand into the engine teardown room, and then everything needs to go back on to the other engine and transmission. We're also going to be testing out another thing that we have been working on, which I will show you the prototypes. So this right here is just a prototype, but basically this is going to allow you to add a fuel injector, or you're supposed to do 4 fuel injectors to plastic intake manifolds. So it's an MPT thread, so you drill your plastic manifold, tap it, even though it's thin, you still do tap it. You put some epoxy resin on it, just like how most of the meth injection kits do when they provide you with the threaded NPT inserts with the epoxy. You put these all on, and then in the case of like the A8, you get a second fuel rail, or really any MR fuel rail, and you use that to mark where these are going to go. You drill them out, thread these in, epoxy them on. In the sides are threaded holes. These ones aren't threaded, but there are threaded holes so that the fuel rail can be bolted directly to these adapters, which will be made out of metal, not plastic, directly to these adapters, and then boom, you just added 4 fuel injectors without having to do adapter plates and things like that, because unfortunately on the MRs, there's not enough room to do adapter plate stuff. And we did the auxiliary fuel thing. It works to a point, but it's better to have an injector per cylinder. So that's what this is for. So we're gonna be testing this using an A8 intake manifold, and we're gonna be screwing around with the butterfly system in there as well, because there's a way for the fuel tech to run that. Or I'm gonna make it so the fuel tech can run that. I'll get to that later. But we're gonna see how far we can push an A8. So that's one thing. And we're also gonna see what we can push out of an automatic transmission for an MR. So that is all coming up in this. So first thing we're gonna do is just rip everything out of here. There's no coolant in it. So just gonna drain the oil, gear oil, and just start ripping stuff out. Takes not even an hour to get this thing out of here because it's just in there, so without any of the OEM crap. I love how easy this thing is to work on. I think 10 minutes, axle's out, everything down here is disconnected. Like, oh, I love how easy this thing is to work on. All right, I gotta lower it down. I gotta disconnect the pressure sensors and then take the wiring harness off. That's it. All right, and it is out. Every time I do this, I try to make it so that I can make it faster. So I usually take the old drain off this to do it. But that adds, process to it because it hits right here. So to make this faster, I'm gonna cut that off, tink, right there. And then this will come out even faster. Most of the time taking this out is fighting with getting it over that. because it gets sandwiched between these two pieces here. So this has to go down, but if this goes down, then it hits. So that's the conundrum. But we'll modify that. That'll be done and fixed. So this chassis, I'm gonna push it back out over to where it can hang out on the side of the garage. We won't need it for a little bit. We're gonna take the transmission off this. I'm gonna leave the turbo system on it and the clutch and flywheel on it, because O-ringing this, we shouldn't need to take the bottom end apart. And the less of this I can take apart, you know, obviously the better. The turbo stuff's gonna eventually have to get transferred to that engine for the testing, but I'm not worried about that right now. So what I'm gonna do is probably just take that transmission off, put it on an engine stand with the clutch and flywheel still on it, so that I can do what I have to do. So it's just a little shortcut I think I'm gonna take. So get this out of here and get the transmission off. I just want to point out that this AC delete belt routing works surprisingly well. We never had a coolant flow problem, that's for sure. And the belt alignment issue right here is from me not putting the right shims in my LS adapter. It's my own fault. I think I might put an OEM alternator in there and see if there's enough contact on this. The problem with the OEM alternator is it brings it over and down a little bit, which might reduce this even more. But this works. I mean, it's been working. So this might be a viable option for if you have an AC compressor go out or something like that, so you can keep driving the thing around. So I might, when I take that alternator off to put it onto that, I might try that. All right, ended up having to take the clutch and flywheel off just to fit it onto this engine stand. Not a big deal, but it's all off, as you can see. If you haven't seen the Turbo manifold before, there it is. And just to show that, you know, you can get by with what you got. This is just a chunk of stainless steel that I cut off something and drilled some holes in, and boom, it works. It's completely sealed. But anyway, that engine's out. So while I was taking this out, I was thinking about, I have to put an oil drain in that. Now, I don't want to go through the process of drilling out this hole and then tapping it and running a new, you know, welding to it, because that's the cast hole for the MR16 turbo drain. So instead, got an idea. I have tons of MR16 upper oil pans laying around, and they have that right there, which is this. I'll pull this out of another one. And the MR16 oil pans bolt right up to the MRA8s. And then I found a fitting that goes from this size to a -8, and then I'll just jump it to a -10. So what I'm gonna do is actually just swap that that upper oil pan out with a juke one. And then boom, basically have a threaded oil drain built into the block. So, you know, that's convenient. And I do need to, at some point, crank one of these over with this removed, this plug. I'm fairly certain it's oil pressure behind that. So on the MR16, this ball right here that's cast in here, that's where your oil feed line is. So you can drill that out and tap it if you really wanted to go through that process. Because right now on the A8, to get oil feed line, you gotta run an oil sandwich plate adapter. But if I can figure out if this has oil pressure behind it, then taking this out and putting an oil line there is gonna be a hell of a lot easier. And then between that and an MR16 upper oil pan, to turbo one of these things, you wouldn't have to do any drilling or tapping. What I'm trying to do is figure out a really, really easy way to turbocharge one of these for reasons that I'm not gonna disclose yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And that's why, you know, the little adapter things, because one of the biggest expenses to doing like the big turbos and all that stuff is you have to make a custom intake manifold for these port injected heads, or you wouldn't even need to go to port injected heads if a regular 1.6 intake manifold could have injectors put on it. So I'm just trying to play around with a way to make it more affordable and make it a lot more emissions compliant. Doing the port injected head swap, you know, there's a lot that goes to that. Whereas if I can retain the DI system and have a consistent, even fuel delivery, then even on the Jukes, you wouldn't need to run, you know, crazy meth injection. You could run flex fuel. You know, I'm slowly working towards being able to do stuff like that, just to open up possibilities for people, because right now it's so expensive to make big power in these. And I'm going to make a video on, you know, how expensive everything is so that people can kind of understand that. The limiting factor is how much you have to do to get there. Making over 350 horsepower is just really expensive on these. It's just really, really expensive. So I'm just trying to work through that. But we got this on here now. So what I need to do is now go get another engine stand to get that engine on so that I can start taking that pan off, swapping stuff over. I gotta get that engine into my engine room to do that. And I also, this is gonna be part of the next automatic transmission video. I have to modify that flex plate to work with the torque converter. So, back to this video's concept, or the reason we're here is to O-ring this. So once I transfer everything off of this onto there, this one, the head can come off and we can get to O-ringing.
Like and subscribe, guys.